All right. I'm sure you've got that a lot. So yes, my panelists are already here. Our panelists are already here, and we would like to thank them, Gideon and Martin, for availing themselves. I will give them a time to introduce themselves at some point, but to welcome them with all of you. And this particular topic and conversation was born out of an intriguing WhatsApp status that I read in the wake of the death of one John Babirukam, a prominent IT guru in Uganda. And I'm sure many of you may know about him. And it was quite disturbing because he actually belonged to a family that some of us knew very well, and we knew they were Christians. And there was no funeral service per se. They couldn't do it anyway. The church doesn't do it, especially that he left a note behind. Sometimes you can make a case when there's no note, but when there is a suicide note, it will not happen. But then when I read Gideon's status on WhatsApp uh, about it, I was intrigued because I was battling. I was thinking, man, there's something wrong about this. I hear, but I'm thinking the funeral service is not for the dead, it is for the living. So if the grieving family can gather with friends and in the confusion uh, get some encouragement, I thought maybe that was one of the reasons why. But well, we would go on to have a conversation with Gideon, and I was very sure that this was a very legit time to have this conversation. So anyway, while other Christians would rather avoid, I think we have decided not to avoid it. So you're welcome. And when Gideon comes to speak, he will introduce himself. But yes, and Martin. So I'm just going to allow them to introduce themselves. Then I'll come back and launch in with a few questions. All right. All right. All right. Gideon, please, could you please holla, greet the guys, and hey, Martin, who are you, by the way? Gwani. Nze Raymond Bukenya. My name is Raymond Bukenya, and I am team leader at True Tangazo Uganda. I will explain those things after introducing my guests, my panelists. So Gideon, you tani koyo ka video katono nganze what? Ne bakulaba notubuzaako. Yeah, yo guy, yo. You're muted, bro. You're muted, bro.
Right.
Good. I hope your signal is good enough. Good to. Is Martin still there? Martin, can you greet us?
Yeah, I'm there.
All right. We are. That's the purpose. I just want to check your signal, and then we can go on. Gideon, I need to be sure your signal is good. I'll turn off my video for now, just to make sure I'm not the one getting a problem. All right. Gideon, I'm still waiting to hear your signal, please. Okay. As Gideon sorts out his signal, I'm going to proceed. I'm going to proceed. I'm glad we have Martin, and then obviously it's a conversation. It's not like a talk session. So it's a conversation, and you will get a chance to participate as well. So you're not going to be passive participants in this conversation. We want you to share your thoughts, and if you have a story and you have any insights, any guidance, because ideally what we would love to see is that anyone here can be encouraged but also be educated, because there's so many of us that just fear to have a conversation. And the Bible is not full of many suicide stories. We only know of one suicide story. I hope you know that particular suicide story, a very sad situation, which some suggest that if that guy hung around for a bit, he would have found mercy, as his colleague, his brother Peter did. But we know that Judas committed suicide. after he was what? After he was guilty, he was struck with guilt, and he thought, you know what? No, Sigenda Kumalako, and he killed himself, especially because of what he had done. And you can't fully use his situation to talk about suicide. But before we even talk about suicide, we have mental health, and psychologists have said that mental health, or rather suicide, is not an event, but rather a process. It is not an event, but a process. And they describe that to be a process that results from mental health deterioration or disorder, mid deterioration, and then finally succumbing to mental health. However, when you notice legally, culturally, religiously, many times around, especially attempted suicide, if people commit suicide and they die, there's going to be shame and embarrassment and stigma towards them and the family. But when attempted suicide, when the suicide doesn't come through, there's going to be a legal issue. So normally there will be a case of attempted suicide, and it's confusing because if it's a process, it means that this person who has committed suicide, we've been with them, we've seen them, they've put on a facade, which we all do, and nothing showed that they were going to commit suicide. So we probably didn't think they were going to commit suicide. Or, what did you say? They didn't talk. And let me just share this picture. Gideon, are you back? I want to hear you if I ask my first question.
I am back. Sorry.
Thank you very much.
The network.
Do you see my screen?
I do.
Do all of you see my screen?
Yes, we do. I do.
Good.
Personally.
So the purpose of sharing my screen is to give you data from very recent, just before, I think we were coming out of the lockdown. And obviously, post-pandemic, the rate of mental health struggle or issues was, you would say, it shot up inevitably because of the isolation, depression, and anxiety. And we remember joking around about that. We remember joking around about the figure. 14 million Ugandans have mental disorders. That's what the report said. At the time, it was simply put 1 out of every 3 Ugandans. Literally, on this call, just to say, the statistics are saying that at least 4 of us have a mental disorder. You understand? And by proximity, that quote there says that if each of the 14 million people interacts with at least 2 other Ugandans, individuals, then almost the entire population of Uganda at the time, 42 million, are affected by mental health. And that's the truth. We are affected definitely by living people who are struggling, or by ourselves being the struggler. So it's either by personal or relational. But then look at the other data. Uganda is ranked among the top 6 in Africa, but globally it is a bit lower. The World Health Organization put it at about 65th in 2019. And the rate of this depression, as you see there, is 4.6. That's a huge percentage. Living with anxiety disorders, that's 2.9. That's not a small number. Uganda, we are talking about Uganda, the country where you live, all right? And what else? As you can see there, the numbers are very clear that depression and anxiety are taking people down. And the World Health Organization tells you clearly that this is normally worsened by difficult times, whether economic or family, relational, work, education. Anything that pushes us to the wall will lead us into mental disorders, and hence it can deteriorate if we don't get support, and then finally, sadly, get into suicide. Now, my first question as I bring in my panelists, Guys, uh, I meant, is suicide and mental health inevitably, are they inseparable? Are they connected? Are they like, is it obvious that mental health disorders or mental health struggles are the reason for suicide? Can I hear from you guys to start with, Gideon and Martin? Gideon, are you able to speak now?
Yes, I am. I hope you
Please.
can hear me.
I do.
You're right. Yeah. So Gideon, Muhima, serve with the Church of Uganda in particular, and I serve at St. John's Kamocha. And the reason I'm giving that particular um, introduction, especially with the church I serve, is that I have had a great deal, I have had a sort of, cordial relationship with the ideas of suicide, considering the kind of people that I have been working with, people that have nothing to live for. I would categorically say that a person in their right mind wouldn't think that death is a way out.
Okay.
I don't think that can't be that cannot be a that can't be a way you would look at it, that someone was in their right mind and chose to just end their life. There's a clear sign that there is something wrong with the way they see the world, the way they perceive the world, that death is a better option than anything else. And that mind cannot be okay. That can't be okay. There's a lot more life has to offer, that the right person, a mind in the right setting will get to see that there's more to live for. And again, I say this because I live with underprivileged people who see more to life than anything else. These are people that are living in almost box houses with no windows, and they have whole families, and they have little to nothing to live by, but they get by and they wake up every day with inexplicable joy. And so, when you have conversations with them, death is not something that is even remotely close to what they are thinking about. These are people who ideally would be thinking there is nothing else to live for. Why not end our lives? So anyone who ends their life or attempts to, or has ideals or romanticizes the idea of death, isn't seeing the world the right side up, and therefore isn't having the right kind of mindset. I don't think that I can say they are mentally well, especially even when we are given the statistics. I think those are my.
I think that's what I'm hearing you saying, and it it's quite interesting because this culturally, legally, and religiously,
Yeah.
when people commit suicide, there is an attitude, there is a way we respond, and legally, like I mentioned already, if you don't succeed, there is attempted suicide, and you're saying a case of attempted suicide, and you're saying that that person wasn't necessarily in the right state of mind. And let me also maybe add something in the same line. So you're saying that no matter how poor people are, and we're talking about materially, no matter
Yes.
how deprived they are, and I come from a background. I have lived in an area where people are actually poor. And I want to ask you, when was the last time you heard of a suicide case in Karamoja? If you're going to,
I have not.
exactly.
I have not heard of any.
You don't hear
ever.
suicide cases in Karamoja, and maybe we are saying it's natural suicide, like nature gets like I don't know if I'm using the right language on record, but nature gets rid of them. It's by anger. You understand? So they are not participating. They are not refusing to eat. They're not taking on like dangerous drugs. That they're not running into a speeding car. They're not jumping off a tall building. And you would say, well, in Karamoja, it's hard. They have less tall buildings or blah, 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 stuff like that. But you're saying that actually the statistics are representative to some extent, and this could be insensitive, of something not connected to
Mm.
status per se, socially, but a state of mind,
No.
which cannot be
Yes.
brought to
A
book
broken
because
state of mind.
a broken state of mind. And how then can
Yeah.
that state of mind be considered to be breaking the law or be considered to committing a sin? Because spiritually, it has been suggested that you cannot go to heaven when you've committed suicide. And that's why we wouldn't even hold a funeral service for you. But Martin is a counselor. Martin, as a counselor, what do you think about what Gideon has just said? Especially you counsel young people, you deal with men, and you know what do you have to say? I mean, you may not have to say much, but is it something that you can identify with, that you agree with as a counselor?
Yeah. Hello. Can you hear me?
With clear, at least me, I hear you clearly.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Oh, great. Where's my video? As I switch on my video,
Ha.
well, it's dark. It's dark out here. But
Video,
that's me. Purely African. Anyhow, just to agree
yeah.
and in relation to maybe share in line with what Reverend Gideon has shared. First of all, introductions. My name is Martin Amanya. I am a counseling psychologist.
Yes.
My counseling in the biblical framework, while I work with people in mainstream organizations or people from all walks of life. It's more like worldview shaping in terms of answering the fundamental questions that shape how we live and where we find meaning in life and things like those. So
yeah,
let me keep the introduction that short and follow up on what I've been asked. I agree, because even when statistics show what age of people normally commit suicide, of course, global stats will show people in ages of 40s and above. But of course, that's not to say that the young ones, teenagers, or they also talk about the elderly, of course. And then, of course, in there, we get to know what factors that put others more at risk than others, or what factors contribute to people committing suicide. It's when you think about the whole of it, indeed, it comes from a sense of dissatisfaction with what is at hand, which makes them which goes now into how they view life, you know, which causes them to quickly think of that as a solution. And you can hear that.
Martin, are we losing you?
You know, hello?
I'm here. We are here. It's okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. We hear you.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm saying you can hear their compromised mental abilities in the moment, or mental health, in how they speak about what they're going through. When someone says, I think I'm becoming a burden to others, I don't see any hope in life, that talks about their view of life and why it would appear as an easy solution for them to take away their life without considering a lot of other things, other goods actually, that life has brought. And like Gideon mentioned, it doesn't have to be so much that people who are in their right minds, even if they are people in an underprivileged community or state where they live and how they live, the view of life, I think, in a sense, God has made it possible that even the poor man and the rich man, if he comes up to the right view of life and its meaning, the meaning is the same according to the giver of the life. Yeah. So that's why you find actually commonly the suicide cases are with those who seem to have achieved, but actually the void of not seeing meaning in life, hope, because maybe they've been trying to find it in things that do not give the real, the fundamental, the essential value and meaning of life. That's why you see they end up looking at that as an option, which actually someone who you think has little may not see, because they have a right view of life. So even in the little, they have more to live for. That is more than just material.
Okay.
For the joys of every day. Even some who are not necessarily Christians. Yeah.
Well, going forward,
I agree with what.
Oh, thank you very much. Actually, thank you very much. Indeed, and especially in our generation, in our times, we are seeing the World Health Organization reporting that actually it's no longer a specific age, like you said. Different ages are committing suicide, and it's shocking. It's disturbing. In fact, one of the questions that I want to ask for us in Uganda, given the numbers, should we be concerned? But before we go to that, please, if you have a question and you want to ask it, please put it in the chat, and Arnold will see it. Arnold will notify me. I'm not able to be looking at the text, the messages all the time, but we have Arnold who will be. You can even put them in the main message chat rather. Well, I want to make sure that as we go forward, that you do not perceive this conversation to be endorsing or approving of suicide, right? Actually, it's very different. It's a reflection. We want to think about the whys of the stigma, the attitude that we have around suicide. If we understood mental health properly, and if we understood that the people who commit suicide are succumbing to a mental breakdown, then what kind of attitude should we have towards suicide? And more especially as believers and as church altogether. So my hope, our desire is that from this conversation, some of your confusion will be cleared around suicide and mental health, and especially from a biblical point of view, and that you will be encouraged and you'll have a better attitude. But do not think that we're trying to approve of or endorse suicide. We actually do not wish it wasn't happening, but it is happening. And that's why we want to have a conversation. And if you've lost a loved one, a friend, an acquaintance to suicide, or if you're struggling with mental health, just know that you can reach out. You've had pastors and a counselor right here, and currently there's a huge drive. Please seek for help. And of course, it is difficult to, it looks like contradictory to say that seek for help, because you might not be in the right state of mind, or the person might not be in the right state of mind to seek help. And that's where we come in to say, okay, we who are in proximity, we who are in relation with the people, are we able to see, are we able to know that because of this behavior, because of this language, because of this, something is going down, someone might be struggling. And again, if 1 out of 3, then anyone around you could be struggling, all right? It could even be yourself, you know? All right, okay, can we go to the next question? I mean, there are many ways people die: malaria, accidents, stray bullets. But we are not here discussing those. We are discussing suicide. Should we be concerned? Should this bother us? Do you think it should bother us? Like, why should we be concerned? Do you understand the question I'm asking? Why should we be concerned? Why should we be discussing suicide and not anything else? Do you understand what I'm asking?
Is that directed to, or anyone can go first?
Gideon can respond. Martin mbadde nteesa video yo tukoze tutya. Gideon, I don't hear you.
I'm here.
Okay, good.
Can you hear me?
Yes. One may ask, why suicide when people are dying of other things? Why should we be concerned? Should it concern us anyway, as Christians, that people are committing suicide?
I I think that well, I'll give you my own little testimony. I have had um I have had three suicide attempts um in my life. When I was six, when I was I think Martin would know how to call it, but I mean how to define it better. Suicidal ideation, where one
Yes.
continuously think romanticizes it because they feel like the world is far much worse to live in than to die. The contemplation of death. So when I was 6 years old, I contemplated on suicide, and I wanted to get rat poison because that was the first thing I ever saw kill a rat. And I contemplated on it because I felt like I was already a black sheep in my home. I came from our lovely home. My parents loved the Lord. They loved me. They cared for me. But I was already feeling like I was not right. I was not. Uh, I was a black sheep by age 6. Partly also because I was exposed. I was molested at the age 5 by one of the people that stayed at home, and that made me feel like I was dirty. I didn't quite understand it. My little brain couldn't comprehend all of that, and the only reaction I could have was to kill myself. And my ideation, uh, I reasoned it out that my family would be in a better place without me in that space. And this was the age of 6. But because I couldn't reach the rat poison, and I didn't have any other idea of killing myself, I said when I grow up, I will get it.
Mm.
Eventually, when I was age 8, I had watched the Japanese. By the way, in the other cultures, suicide is accepted at some point, especially if it brings
Yeah.
honor.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so for because I had watched a movie where that had happened, I wanted to gut myself. But there was always a nudging voice whenever I would want to attempt. I had gotten the knife to get to my belly, and every time I wanted to do it, there was a nudge, and the nudge wasn't "you're going to hell," because I'd already given my life to Jesus. Uh, I wanted to help him along. It was better to be with him, and he's taking long to bring me home. Again, the feelings of unworthiness were really rooted in that, and so um, in my attempt to doing so, there was a nudging. I don't know. I can now call it the voice of God, but back then it was just something that was telling me, "What if you survive? What if you gut yourself and you have your intestines in your hands and you're still alive?" And for me, that was more terrifying than hell. It was more terrifying than any threats of hell. I wanted to kill
Mm.
myself because I knew I was helping Jesus end my life.
Mm.
This
Mm.
this is a period, between the ages of 6 and 14, and I'm thinking these things, and I am born in a home that is stable, in a sense. I am
Yeah.
already there were things that were going on in my head. It is a huge concern for me, therefore, that if I, who was growing in a home where both father and mother were loving each other and me, and I still felt that way, how much more those born in a broken state, in a broken environment, who have actually nothing to live for. And the suicide ideation, the thoughts of it, don't just end in me ending my life. They develop even further. If I am a coward to end my own life, then I can't think necessarily of valuing anyone else's life if I
Yeah.
don't value my own. I'm just a
Yeah.
coward. And so you have people that are maiming others, that are ending other people's lives, that are stealing, are trying to find a meaning in life, or are living life in anarchy state because there is no more meaning and they cannot end their own lives.
Yeah.
So suicide ideation and suicide threats on themselves cause threats not just on their own lives, but on the lives of those that are around them, especially those they do not care much for or should be caring much for, but do not. And so for me, that is one of the grandest reasons why we should be talking about it a lot more. That
Yeah.
it is more than just someone ending their life. It is affecting the community. It is affecting our society in more ways than we would like to acknowledge.
Thank you very much, Gideon. And of course, personal story adds great value to this, because if I hear you, you're saying that anyone is not protected from suicide ideation if
no one is.
No one is protected.
Mm.
No one is protected from suicide ideation. And actually, I think recently when I was listening to the Uganda Counseling Association, I heard them consistently saying that no one is. And inside the church, because you're born in a Christian family, mom and dad are there, they're loving each other, they're loving you, and they have no clue that you're contemplating. All right. Okay. So I would want to get to another question, but thank you very much for that, because you added story and you're showing us, you already told us working in Kamocha, you noticed that you would imagine that those guys are finding life meaningless and they would want to exit. But yet they're the ones who are actually hanging on, and they're saying we are not going anywhere. And they want a better country, they want a better world, and they have less education, access to education or better education, but they're hanging on. And those who are having better education, better exposure, who are shielded from much harm, will actually end up harming themselves because they're struggling to find meaning in life. And so you're saying this is connected to the question of meaning and purpose in life, as Martin also hinted on earlier. Anyway, so then, because if we must have this conversation, again, we live in a
Good
culture.
evening, how are you? Hi.
We live in a culture where suicide is stigmatized. And I'm not talking about stigmatizing it, because that shouldn't be the issue, but it is abominable. And so, like you said, there are fears around when you contemplate it, the fears of hell, going to hell, or the fear that culturally, for example, as I'm told culturally, I've been asking that your body will not be put in the house, it will be put outside. In some cultures, it will be caned. Your body will be caned. There does it. I'm telling you, I've when I was asking people why, by the way, why? And they were telling me it's an abomination. It is. It brings shame on the family. It actually brings bad omen on the family. Some people are saying things like that. I was like, okay, can we reflect it from before the person committed suicide? Because we are looking at the event, and we are looking at how it causes. It is a shame. It is an abomination. It brings an omen, bad omen. But what about before, when someone was battling with all suicide ideation? In fact, you're using the word that the technical people used that I am not technical enough to use freely. But again, I prefer to not have the technical people. Don't worry about that, because I thought this has to be had. That this conversation should be happening at a lay level where people are not speaking academically or professionally, but experientially. And for a pastor like you also, besides your own story, you probably have engaged with others. And I'll be sharing a few of my stories later. But let me ask the next question, as the culture nuances, the popular nuances, the spiritual nuances, the attitudes. How do you think they have contributed to worsening the situation? Because you're saying we should be concerned, but what if the concern was earlier? It came earlier. Do you think the situation would have been better? And let me give context, then I'll let you in. When I sent out this advert, I received a number of texts, people telling me about their own experiences. And one guy asked, one lady actually, the guy, I'll bring in the guy's story later, but the lady said that some of the mental health issues are caused, and I'm quoting verbatim, Some of the mental health issues are caused by the church through abuse and worsened by wrong theology, even the subsequent death by suicide too. It is very sad. It is a very sad reality that the church has not been loving, understanding, empathetic, or compassionate to the people with mental health struggles, suicide ideation, and families of suicide victims. Do you understand that statement?
Mm, mm, mm,
Do you hear what the person is saying? That, they are
yeah,
actually
yeah,
pointing a
yeah.
finger to the church and saying, one, abuse has caused people to struggle with with depression and anxiety and whatever because of abuse. And this abuse can be anywhere, whether in church or outside. But when it happens in the church, it has these effects. But on the other hand, wrong theology about mental health and suicide. This is what the person is saying. It has worsened it, and also suggests, I was shocked, suggests that the subsequent death by suicide could be attributed to the wrong theology and the abuse. Hence, I don't know, like in your conclusion, can we blame the person who took their life? Can we blame the person who
Mm,
succumbed to that?
mm.
And so, in that context, I'm asking, do you think, or how have these nuances by the church, culture, and perhaps even the legal system worsened this? Is this something you can respond to? You think you can respond to?
Well, I think that is, I hope you can hear me. Can you hear me?
Absolutely clear.
Right. I think that the idea that church has really culture, the nuances within that have affected greatly
Mm,
the 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 the, the extent to which people consider suicide. I agree
mm,
with it
mm,
100%.
mm,
And yet, interestingly, even from the church fathers, this was a contemplation. For
mm,
instance, St. Augustine considered several possible justification chapter that he wrote. He wrote it in one of his books. I think it was The City of God, and
it's the city of God,
he
yeah.
addressed the issue. Uh, yeah, I think that it has been an age-old issue to address, and yet, um, over the years, we see people using it as a weapon. They have weaponized the ideation to have control and abuse people while still keeping them alive, so
Mm,
that they
mm,
can draw from them as much as they possibly can. I mean,
mm,
I could cite many scenarios in which church leaders. I would like to very, very categorically say that it is church leadership that has caused this, rather than say just church generally, because church is what has suffered uh, and suffered from church leadership that has abused theology or the understanding of it, and
mm,
grappling
mm,
with situations like this.
mm,
And then we have incorporated cultural norms and Christianized them, or made them a religion. You know, in Uganda, when they beat the body, they're saying that this was an evil thing to do, and for some reason we because we are animated cultures, we everything is a dichotomy. Either it is physical or spiritual. Then we begin to engage these ideas of
mm,
animism
mm.
in
Yes.
our Christian thought, and because we're infusing them in Christian thought, we are beginning to demonize suicide, demonize mental health, as if to say all things are a result of evil spirits, when in fact, um, we
Mm. Gideon, are you there?
I don't know. Can you hear me?
I hear you.
Okay, cool. All
Thank you
right.
very much. Yeah.
So yeah, so I think that these cultural norms. I mean, we don't even have to go too far. We can just cite how people have viewed suicide, the shame, the stigma that comes around, comes to the families that have had someone commit suicide. It is clear as if they're taking on the burden, as if it was their fault that the person committed suicide, whether or not it is their fault. The person made the decision because their hearts were broken, because their spirits were broken. And so for me, I think that the nuances within the culture, within our religion, within all these things have to a great extent damaged our view of this and have even hampered our thought
Mm,
or have hampered the way we ought to be thinking about these things because we have a culture that tells us what to think rather than to think, that teaches us to think. And
yeah.
because we have a culture that tells us what to think, we are now having thoughts about suicide that are, first of all, in my opinion, non-biblical. The farthest thing from a biblical perspective on suicide. They are inconsiderate of mental health issues. They're inconsiderate of the broken spirits of people that are going ahead and idealizing or romanticizing the issue of death. So,
Okay.
and also the fact that we teach death wrongly, we teach life wrongly. We are more concerned with a person's doing things rather than being something. We are concerned about the way they are doing things, and so we are teaching moralism more than we are teaching grace that affects our morals. We are teaching that morals affect our grace or the grace that we receive, and these are influences that affect the way we think about life and bring meaninglessness, even within our
Mm,
Christian norms, even within our Christian fads and our Christian practices. We are continuously breaking because we have culture, religion, and politics invading our psyche and causing us to think there is
ah,
nothing to live for.
Chigambo chinene mwao. All right. But I mean, you brought in the church fathers, you brought in Augustine, and this is not a new
Yeah.
discussion. It has been around, and obviously, the
Yeah.
struggle would be about the eternal fate. I I know that later I want to introduce a discussion on where we are in the world about assisted or compassionate suicide, and but I will bring that in later. You brought in uh, the church fathers, but also I want us to think about it biblically. Uh, you
Mm,
listen to the wrestlings of the psalmists, and one particular one caught my attention in 2019 and 20 when I was in my
mm,
personal valley or dark night of the soul.
mm, mm,
Uh, I'm
mm,
sure people around me would never have imagined that I contemplated suicide twice. Never. They would never have imagined.
mm,
But I actually found a text in the Bible that I actually was hanging on to that felt encouraging. And
mm,
I want to give it to you. But then it's interesting that it is in the scriptures and it can have a wrong interpretation. Psalm 55, many of you may have read it.
mm,
It talks about casting your burdens
mm,
uh, unto the Lord. But if you
mm,
read it, you're going to see uh, how the psalmist wishes that he had wings and that he would fly away. Okay. There is a
mm.
question there.
And be at rest.
Yeah. So let me read for you Psalm 55. I, 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 I remember thinking, I wish I felt like this psalmist. I wished that I had wings. So he says in verse 4, Psalm 55, my heart is in anguish within me. The terrors of death have fallen upon me. Fear and trembling come upon me, and horror overwhelms me. And I say, Oh, that I had wings like a dove. I would fly away and be at rest, right? I would fly away and be at rest. Yes, I would wander far away. I would lodge in the wilderness. I would hurry and find a shelter from the raging wind and the tempest. And of course, the psalmist is not contemplating suicide, but I identified with that state. And as you have said, and as counselors or psychologists would say, that is the desire. People just want to get away from the tempest. And sometimes they think they're the cause of the tempest. Sometimes they think they're failures. Sometimes the tempest surrounds them through the people, like the psalmist is saying that my heart is at anguish within me, and terrors of death have fallen upon me. But prior to that, he talks about enemies, the wicked, trouble upon him. And but then in this psalm as well, it is an encouragement to cast every burden, to cast the tempest, to cast the winds of this world unto the Lord, the burden unto the Lord. But the conversation, the WhatsApp status that sparked this conversation between you and I comes from John Babirukami's death. And his suicide note, in his suicide note, he said, I'm sorry for being a burden in life and a burden in death. And what you're saying is that when people die of suicide, by suicide, they become a burden. We have treated them as a burden. That's why we don't do suicide, funeral services for them. That's why we beat them, because they're shaming us. And then, but then you've said earlier that actually these people succumbed to mental health deterioration, and hence mental health, mental breakdown, right? So that process seems to me like in this particular state that the psalmist is, the personal state that I was in, where I thought, you know what if I left? What if life paused for a moment and all this stuff stopped? What if I could get out of this situation? Wouldn't it continue? I think it can continue. And unfortunately for me, I had lost a wife already. And I think I began to think, she died. Life continued. If I sign out, life will still continue. You understand? And no one knew, because when I would get out of my bedroom and get out there, life would continue. And
come and play basketball with me.
Exactly. I could come and play basketball with you. You know very well. And life would go on. But I think the question I want to bring in is the flags, the indicators. If 1 in 3 is having mental struggles, are you able to know? Or maybe you're the one struggling, so you're not able to know per se, but you should also know if you're struggling. How are you going to seek help when you do not know? But so the question I'm asking here for you and anybody else here, Amanya, are we able to know? How can we know what things? Because later on, I found out today from a conversation from one of the people that were related to John or knew John very well, that when they went to see his apartment, they saw a different John, because he was living in a different place. And when he came, he showed a different figure, but they knew him to be different from what they found in his apartment. You get, after his death, they saw that there was signals in his apartment, but because they were not visiting him, he was not letting people come see him and stuff like that. Okay, so are there signals? Are there indicators? Are there flags that can show us, you and I, that someone is having mental health struggles? Someone is having suicide ideation. Any of you can come at it. Martin.
Thank you. Thank you, Raymond. I think we need to be... Can you hear me now?
Very well.
Hello?
We hear you.
Great. I changed position.
Yeah, we hear you.
So I was starting a statement to continue and say that I think like even in day-to-day life, if you're intentional about your relationship with your wife and children and the general bigger family, the original family, and other people that you're close to, at a workplace somewhere, at a church, if there's that familial warmth, and there are some people you're close to and probably get to see more often and touch more base more than just on the Sunday meeting. I think you get to learn their way of life and how they express themselves when things are going well and when things are not going well. And this could be how they talk. This could be their patterns of sleep and eating. This could be their availability and involvement in your meetings, if you have meetings you have often, or even coming to church or for fellowship. But also the non-verbal cues, if you see them more often physically, if you visit them at their houses, or you ride with them in a car or something, you can observe a trajectory of where some things are changing. And then if you are, it takes being alert, because then you can be able to tell the difference from what has been the norm and what is no longer the norm. And even in that, there is so many times a tendency of as humans, we work around every possible way to not expose our weakness.
Yeah.
So even the people who is struggling with something, they want to present a face. Let's talk now even a bigger spectrum, from social media to physical conversations. Even your child may be, children may be more genuine, but a spouse or whatever, if there's no authenticity between the two of you, but if it's there and someone doesn't really want to show, maybe there are also stereotypes about some genders versus others, tradition, culture, and all those, they can cause us to miss out to see what truly has changed in a person's life, that can point us to the fact that there's something that is happening.
Yeah, thank you very much.
People speak or talk these things in very many ways. So it could be a conversation on the page. Someone is posting one thing, you're asking, how are you doing? They're saying, I'm just okay. Yet they are not okay. But we are trained to say we are okay even when we are not okay. And if you don't go in someone's inbox, or to give them a call, or visit them at their house and find out more. Some of us are here, we are brothers, we are sisters, we are parents, but we spend more than even a year. Like one stays in, both of you stay in Chigoa, one on the other side of the road, another on the other side of the road, but you can spend a year without maybe even visiting each other.
Yeah.
But you're on WhatsApp saying hi or phone calls, but yet actually, between the month of Jan until now, your brother or your parent has been struggling with something. But because you are not being able to see them or hear their conversation, how there are changes, or also understand their way of expression, that when it changes, you know that this is not how Gideon really normally talks, or expresses himself, or avails himself for meetings like this and the other. If they are not coming anymore, if they are not being as jolly anymore, if you are observing a sense of dissatisfaction, even when they have everything seemingly figured out, they have a good career, they have a good family relationship with the spouse, it could be a trigger of a traumatic childhood event that is causing them a lapse in this week or the next 2 days. It could be work-related stress that is being transferred at home, and the husband is changed in their way of communicating. They're easily irritable. They talk a lot about being tired or overly tired. You're observing a spree of inconsistencies. I mean, they're red flags. It's something that should concern you. And if you can't be able to talk to that person, maybe at the level of how you can be able to hear them out, or if they don't feel comfortable talking to you, depending on the relationship and how you talk to each other about these things, you can then refer or seek out a true brother or a couple that you admire, and say, I have observed these changes. I think we need to have a conversation. Or you are the best man. If the best man play the real role of a best man, I know many things have changed over time, but that kind of relationship and intentionality, alertedness about living with one another, being involved, being watchful, and guarding each other dearly, heartily, helps us to be able to easily get to see the changes. And that should raise our eyebrows to say, I think we need to reach out to Raymond and find out what's going. He's not been coming to church the previous 3 weeks, Yeah.
So you are raising very crucial, a very crucial dimension to this discussion, because again, I was listening to one of one of the, I would call him a Reformed theologian that I respect so much, responding to this question. And he said, we know that there are church leaders, we know that there are prominent Christians who have lost family members. We also know there are pastors, there are people that we would have never ever thought that would commit suicide, but we know that they're there that have committed suicide. And he was saying that one of the point of reflection we should have to make is to ponder on is whether we have been loving to these people. And when I hear what you're describing is the paying attention, the loving our neighbor as we love ourselves. We look to what I hear you saying is that we haven't done that well. We are lacking in that area. We are not paying attention. We are not doing what we need to do to know how people are doing. And when we see in our fast running world, it looks like we are busy, or we're not only busy, but also we are trivializing a number of things, a number of signals, and we think, that one is like that. I remember a psychologist saying, when someone says, I think I'm tired of this life, I think I need to exit, and you hear it, never take it for granted. All right? Never take it for granted. Anyway, there are two questions that have come up, and they're amazing questions. Believe me, they are part of the gist of this conversation. Part of the gist. They're very core. One is, how can we trust God in the midst of suicide and mental health struggles? Which, in my preparation, I thought we need to think about the sovereignty of God, the God who can stop you from doing something, who could hinder you from doing something. He is able to. Where is he when people are struggling with mental health and committing suicide? And how can we trust him? Then there's another question on how we comfort the grieving family whose loved one has died by suicide, and while still acknowledging their faith. And this is very important because, again, when we are talking suicide, we are talking about human beings. When we are talking about mental health struggles, we are talking human beings. So how do we continue to humanize, to see human beings? I want us to deal with the second question that I asked. How can we comfort the grieving? How do we stand with the grieving? Because if we maintain that attitude towards suicide, calling it an abomination, calling it an embarrassment, calling it a sin that leads, almost unforgivable, if you would say, leads to hell, how are we to grieve with the grieving? Are they grieving anyway? If they lost someone to suicide, are they grieving? Imagine if someone who dies by accident and their body is, battered and in pieces, they are gathered and brought to a church for funeral service. But if someone dies by suicide, they are not brought to church. Not that I even think that bringing a body to church does anything, but I'm wondering if we can do a funeral service. Are we doing it for the body, to honor the dead, or are we doing it to serve, to minister, to grieve, to stand with the family that has lost a loved one? So this question is core. It is important. It is the reason. It's one of the reasons why we have this conversation. So yes, The pastor and the counselor. How do we comfort? How can we comfort the family that has lost a loved one, even friends, by suicide, while still acknowledging their faith? Let's go with that one. Then we shall go to the one about the sovereignty of God, or where is God in suicide, and can we trust Him? So,
Raymond,
over
can I
to you.
just add to the question a bit?
Yes, please come in.
Can you hear me well?
Clear.
I just want to add to the question, even as we go to answer that. The irony, imagine how betraying it is that the time when the family of the person who has committed suicide and the friends and relatives needs the church most, or needs the people to mourn with them most, to comfort them, to show them love, to be available to process with them this traumatic scene and event that may live in their minds for a long time before they can get over. Is the time actually when the church says, literally what I'm doing by the hands is like washing my hands and saying, like Pontius Pilate, this case, like do as you please. It sounds so hypocritic. And what I can say, maybe I'll say briefly and hand over, maybe I'll come back later. But to me and to other believers, like what you've said, going to the roots of understanding the tradition of doing the funeral service. What's the essence of it? Like you asked, is it for the dead, or it's for actually, or the people who are alive and are going to be processing this loss? So for me, I would say that it comes back to the church being the church that it's meant to be in moments of grief and pain and horrendous loss like that. That is actually what would anchor a person who's been belonging to that community to say we are a family in Christ. We celebrate joys together. When the person was acing their career and they prayed at that community and brought the tithes for those churches that do, but also offerings, or gave some whatever for ministry, missions, or any department, and maybe was involved in any ministry in some way, or even their family. So for us to distance ourselves from them in that moment, for us to treat them as an outcast, not actually because him is gone or the person is gone, and what we are dealing now is with this family, and this family is going to continue coming to this, calling it their family in terms of a family of believers. So when we think about it in that context, do we still consider them part of this family? It's more like, I'm sorry, I may be asking more questions, but in a sense trying to respond to this because of the complexity of what the scenario and what you've asked presents. But to consider those, for me, it points to like the practical Christian living that James talks about. It's like our faith and its actions. It's our godliness being lived in the real practicalities of life day by day. You know, that indeed, if we say we're a family, then we celebrate our joys together and we mourn together. And even in an event where tradition has presented us with things, I don't know where that came from and what it means literally, but picked up on it, and now it's because, does this mean for you in light of life as a Christian? Empathetically thinking, put yourself in the shoes of the family that has lost.
Yeah.
If you were treated like this, you are a reverend, and is it just about you, the leader? is this something that even the congregation and other people agree to? And there are some things that are traditions and whatever, which can be changed.
Yeah.
Which we can learn from their weaknesses and their effect on the body of Christ. And then we can change things for them, in a sense that it can and exposure and acknowledgement of the changes that are helpful for our faith and living with one another, that we can adjust on and do the right things going ahead.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point, because
over to you, Remo.
That's a good point, because at the end of the day, there's no purpose to this kind of conversation if we the believers or the church at large is not being challenged to change, first of all, in what it claims to believe, but also in its practice. So at the end of the day, we need to be thinking, okay, what next? How do we behave beyond now, in the past? And of course, repenting of the pain that we have put on the people, the betrayal, like you said, that we have lived with upon the people. Anyway, yes, Gideon, did you have something to add? You're a pastor. I was having a conversation with a clergyman who told me, oh gosh, I had to tell a lie to the bishop because of doing a funeral service of a boy that was said to have committed suicide, and had to say, I didn't see the suicide note, so I can't confirm that this person committed suicide. But there was a clear indication that this guy had committed suicide. And so this guy said, me, I had to tell him there was no suicide note, there was no proof for it. But there's no way I was not going to stand with this family. And I thought, man, you had to cross lines. I mean, I don't know if God would punish you for that lie, but that's a serious discussion, because you had to but yeah, the church literally, where is it written anyway? So I'm a priest, and I've conducted funeral services, and I know that if a thief was killed at a robbery, chances are a church somewhere will conduct their funeral service if the family is powerful and strong enough to bring their body into a church building. Truth or false?
No, that's very true.
Exactly. So a beloved member of the family who has been struggling with mental health, with depression, with whatever, and they have deteriorated. We have not, like we've talked, we have not been loving enough to discern, to see the signals. And then finally, this person succumbs to mental breakdown. And the best we can offer in the moment is, no, we can't. We can't have you. It's abomination. It's sinful. So where is it written, Gideon? Where do we get this? Where does it come from?
To be quite frank, I don't know. I have done the research, especially after John's passing. I did much. For me, for a long time, I actually thought that we had moved on from. There was an old canonical law from the Church of England. In the 1800s or 1700s that stipulated not to have services for those that have committed suicide, but the caveat was if they were of sound mind. That has been since rejected, and they now conduct services. The Church of England conduct services for persons that have committed suicide. And it would seem to me that, at least in the Anglican context in which I am, they are still running with that. And there is no basis, or at least I can't find any biblical basis upon which they run this. It is
okay.
They call it a deterrence, kind of like, and I'm going to touch on this one, and I know that many people might have issues with it. Kind of like the bill, the homosexual bill that is death to the gays, apparently is a deterrence. Same thing here. Apparently to stop people from committing suicide. And I think that it was a reaction to Augustine's rhetoric on suicide and how he was willing to accept certain aspects of suicide. For instance, he says, may a Christian commit suicide to avoid the ills of life, the hardship of misfortune, or the loss of honor due to the sins of others.
Yeah.
I mean, and there are many other, instances in which Augustine says a Christian may commit suicide if they are, for instance, he talks about rape. If they have been raped and they can't deal with life, they might as well end their life. And his perspective of eternity was, you are going to be with the Lord Jesus anyway. And this is the thing, that the reason I brought up the Augustine situation was that he wasn't afraid to address the issue. He wasn't afraid to face the reasons why people may commit suicide. He cited them out as the ills and the evils of this world.
Yeah.
And they might cause someone to want to end his life. And if they, because of the clarity of the grace of God, if they are believers, how they go didn't matter much.
Yeah.
But that was his view. And he was willing to aggressively deal with it. And fortunately, that I think part of the reason why the church was aggressively avoiding the issue of suicide was because of things like this. And maybe there were people who were committing suicide a lot more because of a giving into this idea that Augustine was pushing for. So for me, I think the concern I have with the church is that, like I had mentioned earlier, we are taught what to think rather than to think, and because you have some people who come up thinking, they're now having to lie in order to conduct services for the bereaved, and quite besides, because of our theology, we should be embracing this a lot more, because we know that we're not praying for the body. They do not have rights anymore because they're dead anyway. So what rationale do they have unless they are adopting the Roman Catholic theology? And that is a whole other ballgame. But for most other people, you die, that is that, you're done. And there is nothing on this side of the world, on this side of heaven, can do about that. And so for me, I think the concern that I have is that we are not thoughtful in how we are addressing this, because we are stuck on what to think concerning the law, which law doesn't have any particular biblical backing in terms of praying for the families that have lost someone who committed suicide. I mean, apparently do they not deserve a service because a member should? What are we trying to say? Are we trying to bring back the law? The children, the bitterness of the fruit their father ate. It's a terrible stance. And again, it is heavily embedded in our cultures and our norms. That law, that British law, and the Church of England law was embedded in their cultural context, which they then transferred here. And of course, the view that you're committing murder, but they didn't know that you can't be of sound mind and end your life. Now they got to know, with all the information they have about mental health, they scrapped that law. We, on the other hand, remained stuck in this. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you very much. Oh man. Of course, there's at some point okubiyemuko kaniso jikubiyenyo, but thank you very much. Let's continue to think about this together. And at this point, especially if church claims to be Christian and following Jesus Christ, someone would ask, actually, what would Jesus do in this case if he met a person, one with mental health disorder or a deteriorating mental health? Obviously, some would argue that he would cast out the demon. And I wanted us to bring in the thought of the bad theology, like the quote I wrote, the message I wrote from some friend. I'm going to bring in Innocent. I'm going to give you a chance to speak in a moment, but let me highlight this. A friend texted me again. I got several texts after advertising, and this guy told me that he was going through depression, and he went to he works within the church. He went to his leader, and the leader sent him back to his head of department, and the head of department asked him, who is not a counselor or trained counselor, but his head of department, asked him if he had been praying for himself. And the guy made me feel like I haven't been praying. Like I've not been praying. And it's my prayerlessness that is causing me to be in such a place. And you hear that kind of wrong theology, but also the fact that mental health can be reduced to a spiritual matter, hence a demon that needs to be cast out. Yet on the extreme side, mental health struggles can be reduced to clinical psychological issues that need only medical treatment. And that's what we have seen in large of the world's practice. And I think it caused John MacArthur recently to actually say, no, apart from the pharmaceutical drive to sell drugs to people and to hook them onto drugs, we are not having, all these things that you're claiming about mental health. We're actually having people whom we have failed to teach how to be resilient, how to deal with difficulty, how to maneuver through failure, loss, whatever. And I think he has a point, but then it's a major discussion because many people obviously would disagree with him regarding his stance towards mental health and especially in the line of medical support. Because for him, he thinks rather than offer medical support, we need to offer spiritual support. We need to teach people. We need to help them know that life is bigger than their circumstances. And medicine won't teach them that. Medicine will pacify them. They will feel a little better, behave a little better, but it doesn't take away what needs to be dealt with. Now, Innocent, you have something to say before we delve into the last question, unless anybody else raises a question, because the question of God's sovereignty, God's presence, where is God when I'm having mental health struggles and when someone dies of suicide is big, and I want us to conclude with that one. But Innocent, you've had your hand up. What did you want to say?
Oh, thank you, Rev. So glad to just be here listening to the conversations from different ones and even your submissions. They are so amazing. And I was telling myself, if these conversations were more delved in, like if it was into the spaces, then we would see a big shift or a big change happening. For me, there are like two things I wanted to put across, like just to comment. One, the practice in like the mental health in our context, different contexts, they vary. In West seems to be different, and in African context also seem to be different. But one thing that I've noted here is for the medical aspect, many medics are trained to handle it medically. While in defining health, we tend to define it to be a holistic approach, a holistic life, a life that is well and in both aspects, both spiritually, socially, emotionally, like all spheres of life, it is well. The person is doing well, and that is the definition. But in real practice, becoming from a medical background myself.
Innocent?
Yes, please.
I'm hearing dogs. Sorry to interrupt you. I'm hearing dogs barking around you. Are you near dogs?
Dogs are outside. Sorry.
Can
you hear me now?
That's much better. That's much better. If you can keep away from them, that would be more helpful. Thank you.
Oh, okay, please. Thank you. So I was saying, coming from a medical background myself, I have known one thing that is important, that many medics go pharmaceutical, go clinical, and for many, they end at that point and they live at that point. But also there are those who have kind of encountered the truth theologically. They have gotten the aspect of handling a client holistically, trying to deal with the physical aspect the mental aspect, but also trying to deal with the spiritual aspect. They're trying to take some history and hear how is this person's journey, what do they know, like taking some basic history, and that somehow really plays a very very big role in transforming life and shifting like someone from the position where they were. But another thing that I've seen is that for suicide, like for the church, on the other hand of the church, is that the church, like in Africa, like it is so spiritual such that to some extent some have gone to the extreme of of counting off mental health and saying these are spiritual issues, like just like you've said earlier, these are spiritual things, they need to bind and cast out demons and all that, and that extreme has really seen the church miss the mark in dealing with these issues that are real with us. And then you ask yourself, I think you've quoted John MacArthur, was something that he was bringing across. You ask yourself, so is this a medical issue or a spiritual issue? So I think for me that is one end of it that I've seen is very very common. And then another thing which we were discussing earlier, the issue of when someone dies or is like commits suicide and passes on, the issue of burial. I had an experience where there was this one man who committed suicide and died, and then the church was not even interested in, like, it is a policy. Any pastor that goes he has to come and even face disciplinary action and something like that. But then we were this diverge. I was serving among them, and we have to do something about it. I'm like, I asked the question that is being asked here today. What is the theological basis of this? How does this come about? Like, where in scripture do we see this coming out? And I think, like Reverend has said earlier, for me always to just note the question this you ask is very important. What would Jesus do? And I think that is something. But I kept asking myself, what is the drive of the church? And I've started some brief history, but something that is very very, and I think it's not basically, it's more cultural than theological according to what I see in practice. Because Africans in our past, there's that ownership of the dead. The dead are honored, and I think that is carried into the theology and it is put in practice in a way, and it is kind of gone across the board. I have seen it not only in one region, it almost cuts across very, very many regions. And for me, that has really challenged me. How do we witness to these people that are hurting? Because there's always that trauma that comes to the family after witnessing such, or after encountering such losses. And how can the church play a big role in this? I remember from the one I experienced personally was where we went with the pastor and the rest of the pastoral team had refused to go, and we prayed with the family, and they left. We left when they were so refreshed. We left when they were so encouraged. And I would just wonder, which opportunities do we miss by just ignoring, saying this is not, no, the church cannot do this. Sometimes we miss opportunities of witnessing, opportunities of building others in the faith, opportunities of encouraging the body of Christ. So for me, I think that my entire conclusion, I just believe that what we see happening, and the church kind of shying off or moving away, distancing itself away from talking about mental health. I think it is a sad one, a sad reality that we see happening around us. But I think for me, I'm encouraged by just hearing that there's some conversation happening towards this direction. So yeah, that is the only thing I could put in for now. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Innocent. And it helps to know that when people like me speak, given my history with the church, people just think I'm ranting, I'm disgruntled. But when I hear from people like you from a different context, it's not just affirming, but it's saying this is a problem. This is a problem. Where did it come from? How do we deal with it? And a conversation like this helps us to know more beyond our sentiments, to know that this is actually real and it's happening on the ground. But then the bigger question is what's happening biblical? And if it's not biblical, as Christians, we don't seem to have a choice, actually. We don't have a choice. We have to think, how do we get back to the biblical? What does the biblical require us to do and be like? All right. Abasa Patrick says, I heard about a Christian, very devoted. She suffered dementia and forgot that she was a Christian. She could only remember her life before her conversion. It was as if she had left faith, but yet it was a mental illness. That's quite scary. And also thinking about the next question, uh, that's quite scary. Of all things that you forget, and I mean, there are many things, of course, you forget when you have dementia. Family, friends, even your workplace. You might even forget your bank details, among other things. Uh, it's not surprising that they would forget about their being a Christian. But if that can happen, then the question is, where is God? Where is God? Is God still sovereign? Is he? And then this question is big because it also goes to the ones that struggle with mental health and commit suicide. Uh, are they still in the position to think of God as sovereign? But even if they're unable, the question is, where is he? Is he sovereign? Is he present? Is he loving? Is he powerful to protect? Is he able to stop this? What's going on? Where is he? Do we see people struggle with life situations in the Bible? How do they deal with it? Where do they take them? Gideon, I know very soon you will be leaving, and I would love you to respond before you head out. And I would like to say that we can continue this conversation, maybe at latest close it at 8. But if you wanted to continue, we are available on Twitter or X as True Tangazo, and on YouTube we will be continuing. But we can even have another one because this is not something that we can say we are done with it. Okay. All right. If you have a contribution to make, you can put up your hand or you can put it in the chat. But yet, yes, I would love to hear from our two panelists, Reverend Gideon. Yes. The question of God's sovereignty in the midst of this. And this can, remember, God's sovereignty applies to all circumstances of life. And then this specific one of suicide and mental health. Are you still there, Gideon?
Yeah, I'm here. This is a very complex situation, especially when you're thinking about God's sovereignty, view all the difficulties. I found solace in Jesus' response in John chapter 9, when so the setting is that there is a view that calamity happens to those that deserve it. And that view had been carried on for generations. And so when Jesus comes across this blind person, the disciples asked him, who sinned, this man or his parents? So even calamity can befall someone and they believe they deserve it because they inherited their parents' sin. And so Jesus gave a very comforting response. And I feel like this response can cut, a myriad of issues. He says that neither this man nor his parents sinned. In other words, they are blind. The man being born blind wasn't any of their fault. Wasn't the man's fault himself, or wasn't the parents' fault.
Yeah.
But this happened so that the works of God might be displayed in him. I think for me, this is exactly what needs to be highlighted on, that God's sovereignty is seen in our inadequacies, is seen in our difficulties, because he is using these things to reveal who he is. And that's the main point. The entire thrust of the Bible is leaning into us knowing this sovereign God, this eternal God, this God that created us that we may experience him. And our fallenness is, which should have been a hindrance for us knowing him. God's sovereignty is such that he will use even that to reveal who he is to us. He says that God might display in him, God's might may be displayed in him. As long as it is day, we must do the works of him who sent me. So when Jesus responds to these people, he is first of all attacking their cultural understanding of sin, of fatalities. There's a fatalism that it seems to be nuanced in their question, that God gives, he pays sinfulness with such, punitive measures, as if he's a bully, just squashing bugs that have sort of hurt him, you know. But Jesus reveals a whole different perspective, and the reason I'm using this portion of scripture is to sort of bring us back to the understanding that the why people, commit suicide. You had intimated on a question earlier on, like genuine battles around detecting red flags and signals concerning those who are committing suicide. And for me, I thought that there are I summarized them in three major aspects why people have suicidal ideation and suicidal attempts. The first, I mean, the three, and I can arrange them in this way. When someone thinks in terms of no one, in terms of no point, and in terms of no joy. No one wants me. That means the feelings of rejection. And if you get to know people and ask them questions that are leaning toward how they feel in relation to others, and they feel answers like no one, there's no one cares, you are, phrases like you are your own, friend, and there is no one else that cares except you. So do you feel that, live for you? And then when they say no point in existence, that speaks to meaninglessness. There is no point. What's the point? What's the point of doing this? What's the point of doing that? I don't see the point. And so they're just going through the motions because there's no point in existence. And then finally, no joy, the joy in living. So the other one is no point in existence, that is being, and there's no joy in living. That is intentionally having purpose. And so because there's no intention, because they don't see the joy, there is pain. And so one has suicidal ideation because they're trying to escape this pain that comes from meaninglessness, the pain that comes from rejection. And so I think that Jesus' response to this kind of gets our eyes away from the meaninglessness of life, the rejection of life, the escape of pain, and puts our eyes on the inescapable beauty and glory of God and His grace, that in view of our fallenness and our brokenness, He has extended His arm to cut the barriers short, to say, you know what, it doesn't matter where you are, I am here to save you, and I am the one saving you. And so for me, that statement, that bombardment of grace upon the world should be the message the church ought to be giving and comforting people, that the sovereignty of God cuts beyond our own pain and our shortfalls and our mental health issues, because God's grace is such that it is revealed in our brokenness, it is revealed in our hopelessness, it is revealed in our meaningless, or the feelings of meaninglessness in faith, because He then becomes who we want. He becomes the point of existence. He becomes the joy of living. And I think that our dealings with people that have lost someone, or people that have suicidal ideation, should be centered around daring them to gently and graciously lift their eyes off this meaninglessness and onto the meaning of life, who is God, onto the one being that brings the joy in living. That is God. And I think that for me, if the church were able to, advance the gospel in this way, that we are not just proclaiming words, these are not things we have crammed, that we are living them out, because God is real in us, and God desires for us to have a heartbeat like His toward those that are broken, toward those that are facing issues of this kind, suicidal ideation, and people who have experienced suicide in their homes. I think that it is, like, I can't express enough just how inevitable it is for us to, as Christians, to look to Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, to look to Jesus, the comforter, to look to Jesus, the one that dies on the cross, the one for whom, everyone was looking up to Him. He says that He will be raised, and everyone who will lift their eyes to Him will be saved. That is, for me, the main message to a world riddled with suicide. That Jesus is not here to to damn you because you have committed suicide, or because you have played a part in someone committing suicide, or you're being punished because there is suicide in the family. Things like generational curses and that.
Yep.
And this was that hogwash that is being proclaimed on pulpits, and it is all void of this very gospel that you hear reverends and priests and pastors and whatever preaching in funeral services, and there is no hope. There is no salvation. It is just a bunch of moralistic traditionalism that is going nowhere. No wonder people are dying. No wonder people are trying to kill themselves, because if they can't find hope in the pulpit, where else are they going to find it? And so I think that this is what we should be gearing toward, in view of suicide, in view of bringing light into spaces that have been riddled with this darkness, the darkness that has been cast upon them by the suicide attempts, by the suicide ideation, by losing someone to suicide. I think I'm very passionate about how the church, and by church I'm talking about wananchi. I'm talking about you and me without the collar.
Are you wananchi? No, it's okay. Just let it pass. Yeah.
So okay, I'm talking about the common folk without the collar. You and I are human beings first.
Yeah.
We ought to be reflecting the heart of God, because He lives in us as much as He ought to live in them. And so our privilege should be their blessing. Our privilege should be their blessing, regardless of the darkness in which they are.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you very much. And obviously, thinking about the sovereignty of God and God in this picture, God loves, God cares. And I think the dilemma that we face, obviously, given that we know that He loves, He cares, and He's able, and we are told that He heals all diseases, and we take mental illness to Him in prayer, and it remains, and people succumb to it. Some people will take it as if God has not answered their prayers, God has rejected them, they have not done enough. And that also can contribute to another struggle, either by family members or those that are mentally ill themselves. And thinking about it as an illness, mental illness, when people, Gideon has gone off. Anyway, someone asked me, where do pastors go to when they're experiencing mental struggles like anxiety or depression? Whom do they go to? And it's quite an interesting thing, because doctors do go to fellow doctors, but the stigma of actually going through mental illness or depression for a pastor, the stigma around it hinders pastors from actually opening up. And I think many people will struggle to open up. There's been a very big discussion about men and mental health. And one of the reasons why men do struggle silently is because of that, because opening up has its implications in terms of how people view you and how people understand your spirituality. They might think, you opened up to, you're demon possessed, you're being attacked by demons. Anyway, we will need to soon close it. And if there is any question or any contribution, I'd like to hear it. Let me read something here before I ask the final question. That there is an issue we have in our churches, or say fellowships and communities. Everyone seems to assume that men should be strong and should learn to face their issues instead of being cowards. Consequently, attention is given to the female gender. I even see this at my church. You will rarely see people giving attention to men. Everyone cares to know how the ladies are doing, which is okay. But I think we should give attention to the male gender as well. Absolutely true. Absolutely true. But obviously, because we are a patriarchal society, I don't know. and it is assumed that men are strong enough, which is dangerous to do so. And from a personal experience, I think both as a church leader and a man, when I was going through my own experiences, there were so many assumptions of he's a priest, he's a man, he'll pull through, and I was also muscular, and people looked at my muscles and they looked at everything I was able to do, and then my position as a priest, and probably they imagined, that one will pull through, and it's God's grace. It's God's grace, and I can live to tell that it's God's grace that saw me out of that. And in fact, when the psalmist talks about the valley of the shadow of death in Psalm 23, he's not only describing being attacked. Of course, at the end, he talks about enemies and being surrounded, the Lord putting a table before his enemies. But even the fact that going through the dark night of the soul and depression and contemplating suicide because of the difficulties in life does look like a real valley of the shadow of death. And it's just a moment. It's just because the tools are there, the means are there. Gideon described, I know he's off now, but he described that in the Eastern culture, the Japanese, and I think many in Asia, some suicide cases are considered honorable, especially when you've done something wrong, and in honor, you get rid of yourself. You just kill yourself. You get rid of yourself in order to show honor, and that one is not our line of thought, our worldview. As a Christian, when you've done something wrong, no matter how grave it is,
the grace is still enough.
The cross, we need to take it to the cross. But remember, when you're doing that as an honorable act, you're in a proper state of mind to even work that out. The president of the Uganda Councillors Association, I think she's Dr. Elizabeth Akello. Yeah, Dr. Elizabeth Akello said, I was hearing her saying that when someone is contemplating suicide or even successfully commits suicide, they are not in the proper state of mind. You cannot say that.
Yeah.
Whether they succeed or not, all right? They are not in the proper state of mind. In fact, she says their mental capacity is under attack, and they need help. And they may not even be able to help themselves or even call out for help. They need us. And he suggested that there is something that God has given to us that we should be using to pay attention, to know, to observe, and support. And there are many things that you mentioned, Amanya, Martin, about people beginning to isolate themselves. People who know me, who knew me, must have, who knew that I was a public person. I was always outgoing. I was always out there. At some point when I was becoming less and less of that and hiding, they should have detected. When I was out in the lockdown, when I was home with my kids, they probably didn't work out, but they wanted me, so they would knock my door. But I would lock that door, that bedroom, and I'd be in the bedroom the whole day. And I would only come out, sneak out, sometimes even just in my boxers, just to grab a drink and run back to my bedroom. And they were not sharp enough to work out what's going on. But there were people around me who were staying with me who could have, if they knew, could have thought, wait a minute, there's a lot going on, but this is not Raymond, okay? And again, if it was not the Lord himself, I don't know. Of course, there were people who called in, people who checked in on me, but as church, as Christians, as believers, we need to be watching out. We need to be looking out for each other. We need to be loving each other. And I think that's where we are failing, because we are loving ourselves more and loving the world more. So we care about the world more and we don't care about each other. And also the caring, I would say, some of it is very superficial, very, very benefits based. How do I benefit from caring too much? If I don't seem to be benefiting mutually anymore, then I'm not going to be caring. And then the next thing you know. So when this
friends with benefits.
And this is what I was saying last. So when I shared the invite, I got a text from someone I knew that has been off the radar for some time. that told me they climbed Workers' House. This happened in the past, less than a year ago, somewhere at the end of last year. They climbed Workers' House, ready to sign out. And I was like, I know this person. I knew they were off the radar at some point. I did actually reach out at some point, but the messages that were coming back were, yeah, I'm okay. And then I would just go on to do other things. The world is running super fast. But, and how will I feel when they end their lives or something? If they had, I think it was Tegule who wrote an article about how we are losing many people whom we would have had an opportunity, whom we have had opportunities to connect with and get to know how they're doing, and potentially, so we can live with the guilt of not being present. And yet, if we were present and loving, we would make a difference. But again, it's also because of how we have redefined the meaning and purpose of our own lives. That's how we are looking or trivializing the meaning and the importance and the purpose of other people's lives. The Bible calls us not to overestimate our own lives above that of the others. And it's important that we remember, if we are a Christian, then you ought to look to the guidance of Scripture. I needed to ask a question of Gideon before he left, but I want to throw it to you guys. What do you think is the eternal fate of people who commit suicide? Do you think they're going to hell or heaven? As you think about it, what have you always thought, or what do you know? You could just say what you think or no. It's okay.
Raymond.
Yes, sir.
Can I
please do come in, just that your network is a bit breaking up. It's breaking. Your network is breaking.
Takeaways. My back. Can you hear me?
Yes, now it's better.
How's it now?
Better.
Okay.
Better.
Begin with the question you ended with. In my opinion, I think it goes to the basic tenets of Christianity, where they confess the faith, they are true believers. I would think on the basis of that, at the time of conversion and how God has been aiding them through, save for the fate of them in trying to not get the rightful help about what they were going through at the moment. They succumbed to suicide, as still God would still would not, on the basis of that, one thing of
Bro, your network is going, I don't know, but it's okay. Okay. Your network is a bit shaky currently. Anyway, I would like to hear from others as well. Thank you, Martin. So you're saying that you believe that they're committing suicide or succumbing to. Martin, your network was breaking a bit. But if I heard you correctly, you're saying that they are dying to suicide or succumbing to mental breakdown does not take away their initial confession of Christ as Lord and Savior, right? Okay, so in this case, their salvation does not, is not affected. And I would want to ask perhaps a follow-up on that. Is then the commandment, thou shalt not murder, does not apply to self in that case? But let me hear from others as well. Though we are 5 minutes past our time, so I want us to conclude. Someone shared very important messages that I would love us to reflect on. One says, just to encourage you, I was diagnosed with major depressive disorder, which means I keep getting depressive episodes, sometimes out of the blue. I grew up like that, but it got worse in the recent years, especially in the pandemic, right? Especially it was made worse during the COVID pandemic. I didn't want to consider medical attention because I didn't like the idea, but I can assure you, ever since I considered medical help, there has been an improvement. My moods are in control, and I'm almost living normally. And I want to say that you're actually, don't say almost, but you are living normally. You're able to even tell us. You're able to encourage someone. And this is very important. And my relationship with God and walk with Him is picking up again. I like to tell people that medical help, seeking medical support or help, is not to say that you have little faith. I have lived with pain ever since after my motorbike accident that left my left hand with a brachial plexus injury, that I can't use my left hand, but it also has neuropathic pain. My nerves that are damaged keep wanting to connect and they keep sparking. And so I've lived with pain since 2020. And between 2020 and 2022 August, I lived on painkillers every single day. I began with 10, came to 7, came to 3, came to 1, until August 2022 when I said, you know what, I am tired of painkillers. But guess what? Those painkillers took me through those years. And whether I prayed or not, the pain was there, all right? And sometimes it would be less. But now it's not that much. My threshold is higher. However, if it becomes too much sometimes, I do grab a painkiller. That is nothing to say that God is not sustaining me. It is also to appreciate that God has given the medics the gifts, the wisdom to manufacture this medicine. So with this encouragement also, seeking clinical support, medical support in the times of mental illness, there's nothing wrong. If the diagnosis shows that you need that, please go for it. It is not a mutually exclusive situation, either medicine or God. No, actually, it's both and at least you should know that there's no existence of medicine without God. No, there's no medicine. There's no medicine without God. So the last one. This is a great discussion. Thanks to Martin for inviting me. With the expansion of the church congregation, many pastors are losing deep, meaningful connections with their congregations. As a result, many Christians are not truly shepherded and often find themselves without a trusted support system. The limited pastoral resources are stretched thin, highlighting the need for innovative and develop suitable pastoral systems to enable meaningful discipleship. Absolutely. Where there's no pastoral support, goodness me, mental health disturbances or disorders can go unattended to, but also can be misdiagnosed, and anyone can attend to them. And culturally, I don't think we have the best system Someone can be called omulalu. And when you're called omulalu, it's offensive if you're not. And anyway, there are things that Malaru do, or what we call mad people do. And we don't take them to book. We don't think that they are mad. Rather, they're sane enough to do the right thing. So we know that they did it because they are not in the right state of mind. And so once we say that, Olimolalu, we have put you in that category. The last one, I believe society does not automatically condemn someone to hell, though through God's mercy and grace, I believe he loves and forgives those who struggle with mental health and suicide. It's a difficult one, but I pray that we look again to God's grace, God's character, and what he himself has guaranteed. What has he guaranteed? What did he accomplish at the cross? And as we began, those of you that were not here, we said that people who commit suicide, we have been told by the mental health practitioners that it's hard to even imagine that they were in their right state of mind. And if they are not, then where do we arrive to the fact that to hold them accountable for that particular decision of committing suicide? If God won't be, then how does our legal system do that? How does our church do that? How does our culture do that? By calling it an abomination and condemning them, and then even not holding funeral services for the families. Thank you, friends, for coming, and thank you for the wonderful engagement. Thank you for the comments and sharing your own experiences. Thank you for contributions. I think this has been wonderful. We don't have Gideon because he was joining another meeting. So, but thank you for coming. Thank you for making it worthwhile. And we look forward to having more. These we call them Tangazations at True Tangazo. And someone was asking me what is Tangazations. I said it is actually Tangazo and conversations. It's conversations on life, faith, and truth. And it's conversations that some people may rather not have, but we want to see how we harmonize our life, our faith, and what is the truth that informs all these. And so, because it becomes difficult, how do you practice your faith? How do you continue with your faith in a world where people are, committing suicide because of mental health, and the church has no answers? How do you reconcile your faith with that, among other things? So thank you very much for making it. This is one of the conversations that we are committed to having, and many others.
Okay.
Good.
Sorry, Raymond, my internet went off, and
I
thought I would have an opportunity to say a bit of parting shots, but if it's closed, it's okay.
Yeah, you had actually. I was saying parting shots because I'd lost you, and because it's already past 8. But thank you very much. Thank you for your contribution. Is there anything specific that you wanted to say just in 30 seconds? Because I was closing it.
Well, what I can just say is that I think it's clear biblically that the life we live this side of heaven, even as believers, we're not exempted from the struggles.
Absolutely.
But we are assured to this end, the Christian, we are assured of, I think the Psalm you quoted, Psalms 23, or through scripture, even when he sends the disciples on the Great Commission, which later is
your network hasn't got much better, bro. It's disturbing a little more.
God assures us always of being with us. That there will be good times, there will not be control about. Some are a consequence of them. Let me just pause it here. But just which the Bible reminds us also to love one another, and then that's how we get to be able to know how to support one another.
Absolutely.
We know what's going on in the lives of one another, and so much the responsibility of our leaders in faith, in church, in this context, to be attentive to these, not to overlook them, but to be also open to learning and growing and seeing some things that may need to be
We've lost you there, but thank you very much, Martin.
For the better building of the body, as also reading and studying about these things, because they're here with us.
Sure. Well, thank you, Martin. I think your network again is breaking, but thank you very much. That's very good encouragement and good parting shots. So thank you, guys. If we have a better understanding and better attitude towards mental illness and mental health, we will be able to help others. We need to be more loving, more present, more genuine, like Christ would. The Lord bless you. Thank you very much, guys. And we will be sharing this recording afterwards. But if you have...
be in a better place to help, but also it broadens our perspective. Yeah.
All right. All right, friends. You can leave at will. All right? You can leave at will. Thank you very much for joining the conversation.
Raymond, can you hear me?
God bless you guys. Yes, Ivan.
My goodness, man, I've been driving for like the last 2 hours, but I wanted to just pass on just a vote of thanks to you. Thank you so much. This has been so enriching, and I've been as well so enlightened on the different topics. But I want to thank you for this, and I pray that we continued having these conversations. If there's the term, if the words that I've just heard for the first time, that is suicidal ideation. I had not heard that before, and it's so real.
Use it. I've heard technical people, the practitioners use it. It's romanticization. It's ideation. Yeah.
And I mean, the statistics were also really screaming. So thank you. I just wanted to appreciate you, and so I've not been so engaged. I've been listening while driving, but I appreciate everyone who has been sharing. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. I shared that screen. That's not the screen I wanted to share. This is the screen. Which screen are you seeing? Are you seeing the screen of the statistics?
Yes, that's one. That's the one.
Yeah. So that screen, man, those statistics that you're talking about were really scary. Yeah. Just to see how
But
much.
Thank you.
Thank you, bro. Thank you for coming on. Thank you for Ugenda guy.
Man, I'm from a VD in Zambia. Name on a jam on your side. Just dropped off mom a kamori. Nakatuke Ruzira. Yeah.
Sorry,
but
man.
My greetings to family. Yeah.
Kale Vambi. Thank you.
Kale, thanks.
Thank you. Greetings to your family too. Bye. Good night.
Thanks. Bye.
But hey, thanks for coming. Trinity. Am I saying Trinity? Yes, Trinity. Great guy. Trinity. Good to see you. Thanks for logging on. Thanks for being on. Samuel saying thank you for being on. I'm so glad. Thank you for making it. This is the one of them that we shall be having on this particular kind of difficult topics, but we'll try to have as many as possible, probably on a monthly basis. Since you have unmuted, but you're not talking. Nyorono. Avasa Patrick. Patrick, thanks very much. Thanks for being for participating both in the message and sharing a lot of your experience. That's very helpful. I think personal stories are always crucial in such discussions, so that It's not distant. It's not abstract. It's not out there. It's real. We experience it. And God, by His grace, sustains us. Sorry, Trinity. It's okay. But thanks very much. You actually asked a very important question. And I hope you got a helpful response. Kaliwa Guy, God bless you. We will alert you about the next one. Bye-bye.